The Washerwoman and Our Lady of Guadalupe. Apropos of living the unlived life, I will recount here a legend that comes from Mexico. It is the story of one of the appearances of Our Lady of Guadalupe, the manifestation of the Holy Virgin that is most honored in Mexico. You may find it apocryphal, but if you will take it as allegory, it carries a symbolic message. Here is the story. Many long years ago, a woman became a nun and lived in a convent. The convent was very small and poor, and perhaps the rules were not quite strict enough. Somehow, a handsome young man managed to hang around the gate and catch her attention through the grill. Or is it greenish? The next evening, at Vespers, as she followed her prayers, she looked through another grill, and there he was again, looking at her with a mixture of desire and adoration. So she stopped praying. She tried, but she couldn't. After that, all she could think of was the young man, his face, his hair, his eyes. The next day, she accidentally, but on purpose, found herself by the gate, and he slipped her a note. "Be at your window at midnight. I will come for you." She could not resist. For all her sense of sin, for all her horror at what she was doing, for all her terror of the wrath of God, she was totally in love, captivated. So she waited at the window and went down the ladder, off into the forbidden world. For at a time she lived in a paradise of romance, love, and sensuality. But the dream turned into a nightmare. Her lover was handsome, charming, passionate, but irresponsible. He didn't support her. He made her pregnant. Finally, he abandoned her. As years went by, her life became more miserable. She suffered illness. Her child died. She finally became a prostitute. Lonely and miserable, she longed for the days of her innocence in the convent, the life she had lost forever. After years of this, sick and aging, feeling death approaching, she decided that the one thing she wanted was somehow to spend the last unworthy days of her sinful life in her beloved convent. But how? She could never tell them who she was. Finally, she went to the Mother Superior and asked for a job as a scrub woman. She was so ravaged by time and sickness that no one in the convent recognized her. Every day she scrubbed the floors of the cells in the chapel. She was surprised by one thing. For some strange reason, no new nun had been moved into her cell. It was just the same as she had left it years before. Why, she wondered, but she was afraid to ask anyone. After many days of this hard work, which was for her a penance, she found herself on the floor of the chapel, surveying the wreckage of her life as she scrubbed the tiles. She looked up at the statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe, with her flowing mantle, the color of the blue night sky, and the stars shining from it. To her amazement and terror, the statue came to life. She saw the Virgin in her living room form. Wow, starting to get a little tongue-tied, I'm sorry. She saw the Virgin in her living form. The Virgin came down from the altar and stood by the kneeling scrub woman who waited to be castigated and damned for eternity. Then the lady spoke. "Don't you know that I have taken your place here in the convent all these many years, waiting for your return? Every day I have taken your place in the choir stall, every day taken your place at meals, and done your tasks. No one here, other than I, knows that you have been gone. You have never ceased to be a nun, and now you will start your life again where you left it. Now go back and take your place that I have kept for you." And so she did. If we take this legend as symbol, it expresses a wonderful principle. Whatever life we live in our bodies, whether priest or nun, businessman or career woman, husband or wife, mother or father, professional in coat and tie or field worker in overalls, each of us has many lives that wait inside us, wanting somehow to be lived and consciously honored. If you are a nun, you can legitimately go in active imagination to the inner world and there live through all the unlived potentialities within you. You may go down the ladder, see what the secular world is all about, and honor it for what it is. However, For however many cycles of inner time you may be there, the Virgin will take your place for you in your stall. When you come back to your cell, no one save she will know that you have been gone. God understands these things perfectly. If you are a priest and you need to go off inwardly and secretly and live in an Italian village with your wife and children and go through all the joys, sorrows, and responsibilities of that life, then that is open to you through active imagination. On the other hand, if you are one of those people who live a totally secular life, married, rearing children, or caught up in the business world, you may find a priest or a nun secretly living inside you, an important energy that has been hidden away and postponed. You may go to that inner monastery in active imagination and find a way to live out that side of your soul. If there is a great hero or heroine living there who needs to go to a Renaissance kingdom and struggle on behalf of the Queen, you will also find that part of yourself and that mythic land where it needs to live a while in active imagination. Whoever we are, our ego lives are partial systems with a huge backlog of unlived life hiding within. No matter what you have done, no matter where you have been or what you have experienced, there is always more. I'm going to try and tie this next section in here as well. It's called Experiencing the Spiritual Dimension. The third level of active imagination is very similar to what people have called visions. It is difficult to talk about this level. If we are too psychological and analytical, we miss the true power and meaning of this kind of experience. But when we use the poetic and religious language that we really need to describe it, we get mixed up with our popular assumptions about visions and psychic experiences. Visionary experience is an eruption of what the medieval mystics called the unitive vision into one's consciousness. An image or a set of events seizes one through the imaginative faculty with such power that one really knows and experiences the unifying truth of the self. One sees for a brief time a glimpse of the true unity, beauty, and meaning of life. When these experiences come, they always have a powerful impact. Within a day or so afterwards, perhaps one has lost the intensity of the revelation. Perhaps one is back to bickering with people and caught up in the petty things of life. But somehow the memory of these visionary experiences works on unconscious attitudes at a very deep level. Sooner or later, it brings a sense of faith that wasn't there before, a knowledge of the meaningfulness of life that had not been there before. Such experiences should not be actively sought. If you look on this as something to be pursued as an accomplishment, you are liable to manufacture quote-unquote spiritual experiences as an ego aggrandizement. Or you can be pulled off into occultism, which leads away from consciousness and into seeking these kinds of experiences for the thrill or the novelty of it. It is better just to do your humble inner work. When you have done enough work, invested enough energy into the unconscious, and if it is appropriate, visionary experience will come uninvited. If it doesn't come, it means that you don't need it. This is not a competition for the highest honors. But since this experience often does seize people who do regular inner work, it is good to be aware of it and be able to deal with it should it occur. The true forms of this level of active imagination comes when one least expects it. It is possible to be walking down an ordinary street and suddenly find that the street, the buildings, and the people around you have been transformed into a spontaneous vision. In your vision, you may be seeing the street of life, the whole human race, the creation of God, revealed as a timeless flow of life. The sidewalks and buildings do not physically change, but the active imagination erupts on a level of consciousness and produces a vision that incorporates the physical surroundings. They become representations of something that is transcendent and eternal. It sounds like a psychedelic experience where you see the oneness of everything and the breathing unity of everything in that experience. but this is induced just through regular inner work. One of my patients was driving on the freeway early in the morning on his way to work, with the morning sun rising in the eastern sky. Suddenly he was seized by one of these experiences. The sun turned into a sun wheel with spokes radiating out and giving birth to all the myriad forms of life and human concerns and activities. His attention was so riveted by the sun wheel in front of his eyes that he had to pull the car over and stop until the active imagination finished and he could get back into the physical world again. He knew, as he looked at the sun wheel, that all the separate elements of his life and all the jumble of life around him flowed out of and back to one source. In that moment, he could see that there was only unity, and that there could only be unity in all things. If you say these things, they may sound like meaningless platitudes, sentimentalities, and cliches, but when such a truth comes up spontaneously from the depths of the unconscious, when one sees it as an image produced from within, one feels its truth. One no longer needs to hear it from others or try to prove it to anyone. From one moment to another, you know from your own experience. This is perhaps the essence of the meaning of these visionary experiences, as it is really the heart of active imagination itself. It is a way of learning from your own experience those profound truths of life that can't be transferred from one person to another with words, but can only be genuinely known through one's own connection to the collective unconscious. In this sense, we can only learn what we already know at the unconscious level. Kierkegaard expressed this principle when he said that no one can give faith to another. He meant that no amount of teaching, no words, no matter how sweet the aphorisms or how rational the arguments, can communicate the experience that gives birth to faith. There is a kind of knowledge and a kind of faith that only comes from experience. We have to look deeply within ourselves to find them because they can't be experienced secondhand from other people. Each person must go directly to the source. Misunderstandings can arise when a vision is experienced not as an event in the inner imagination, but as though it were a physical event happening outside in the physical world. This was the universal experience of primitive human beings and the traditional understanding of visions in centuries gone by. People believed that some spirit or creature appeared to them from the outside. They experienced the images as though they were quasi-physical beings outside themselves. Actually, visionary experience is a form of imaginative experience, another welling up of images from the unconscious. The images are not only projected on the inner mind, but become so intense that they are projected outward and appear to be happening physically out there. After you've done active imagination for some time, if you should experience this kind of vision, you will see the similarity to your active imagination and your dreaming, and you will conclude that it was an experience of active imagination in which the images appeared to you in an apparently objective way. The other form of visionary experience might be called inwardly perceived vision. One goes through the same vivid, powerful experience of images, but is aware that it is happening inwardly on the level of imagination. You are aware that you are seeing it with your mind's eye, looking within yourself. There is no confusion because you don't have the apparitional or hallucinatory feelings that you are looking at an external physical event. An example of this would be the active imagination that I experienced with my interior lion after he appeared in my dream. At the end, the imaginative acts became visionary in their power, yet I was aware that all this was happening inside me. Still, the immediacy, the sense of the presence of the creature, and the power of the image were so strong that it was almost as though the lion were a physical being. I have one more section to go, and I'm going to do one more video. I'll be right back.